maybe, for instance, explaining it, you, assuming you exist, I can't technically know that there's a mind in there, but for now, you perceive this image, right? Or you don't want to say perceive, experience mentally this image. Perhaps I don't exist. Perhaps no outside world exists, right? Maybe you're a brain in a vat. You know, maybe there's an evil demon.
You can't use the word you. You can't use the word you when you refer to him.
Just explain the view. So
I think when you consider just like the fact that we're both consciously talking about, I find the level of difficulty in actually believing that to any extent, right? Like, because, okay, I can respond to your thinking.
Sure.
Yeah. Like objectively, I can do that. I just did that.
I would say there's an objective truth about whether or not you can do that. I would not say that is like accessible knowledge. Okay.
Because you don't know that he's not a figment of your imagination.
Figment of my imagination.
You're a she?
Yes. So
I think you're a he.
Like I'm
so
saying,
when I take the term justification, right, in terms of like knowledge is justified true belief, I think that your justification has to guarantee the truth of the thing you believe, right? In order for it to be like knowledge in the strict sense and not the colloquial sense.
your knowledge has to justify.
Like, what if you're dreaming?
What if I'm dreaming?
Right. So how would you justify the belief that you're not dreaming right now?
I can't.
Right. So Cartesian rationalism, I think, falls into Cartesian skepticism. But there are certain mental states that I can be sure of, and then no is used very like colloquially in terms of like what has worked, I guess.
Well, I have actually experienced dreaming.
Okay.
And because I've actually experienced dreaming, I know it's sort of temporary lucid state.
Yeah, in the Christian worldview, that makes sense that there's a difference between dreaming and reality, and you can sense that difference in that what you experience the majority of the time is different than what you experience in a dream in some sense. They're not exactly the same. And that makes sense in a Christian worldview. But if you don't put faith in what God says about reality, for all you know, what you're experiencing that you call a dream might be the real reality, and maybe this is the dream.
I agree with you. I believe the same things you do. I just don't think I can take a step towards saying I know in like a strict sense. But in everyday conversation, I would agree with you when I say like I know I'm not dreaming, and I would take that to mean I have a very high likelihood that I'm not dreaming, right? I wouldn't take that to mean knowledge per se, like strictly. And he's asking that you would like have faith in the Christian God to justify the rest of your beliefs. My contention is that such like an axiomatic thing of like having faith. Well, he would provide an argument, right? This transcendental argument, which, forgive me if I'm wrong, is you can't derive any knowledge without God. Therefore, you know, God has to exist because you do have knowledge.
You can't deny.
You can't derive. You can't know anything without God.
Without revelation from God.
So my contention then is that this is a circular argument because you can't know that you can't know anything without God. So I would say that this boils down to I know God exists because I know God exists, and I would claim that circularity isn't acceptable as a basis. So that's that simple.
It's not. That's not the argument. It's I know God exists because I couldn't know anything if He did not exist.
How do you know that this argument is valid?
Well, because. What do you mean by valid?
Like, how do you know this argument works, right? How do you know your premises are true? Like, I can't know anything if God doesn't exist. How do you know that? You have to
because omniscience is required to justify beliefs.
Okay.
If I trust in non-omniscience to justify beliefs, I could always be wrong because there could always be some fact about reality that I'm not aware of that could invalidate everything I think I know.
Sure. I mean,
so that's my.
True.
So I'm.
It could be that God doesn't exist and you don't know that, and it could be that therefore you know nothing. Right?
You're saying it could be that God doesn't exist?
Case, right?
Well, if he didn't exist, then what you just said makes no sense, and I can't. Because I can't be justified in the belief that you're another human being who's talking to me. I can't be justified in believing that I've been conscious for the last 5 minutes, or that I'm the same entity that I the same entity. I've been the same entity for the last 10 minutes. There's just a whole menagerie of things that I can't justify that would make your speech to me unintelligible. So you can't justify beliefs about speech without revelation from God, because you're trusting in finite consciousness that could always be wrong.
So your argument would go something about like, so omniscience is required
to justify beliefs,
right? Not necessarily God, but you would then later derive that omniscient thing must be God, correct?
I'm only asserting the Christian worldview. I'm not saying any other worldview would work for this.
Okay.
So
what about some other non-Christian omniscient deity though?
He doesn't exist.
How do you know?
Because the all-knowing being tells me he doesn't exist.
What if, I mean, there are other people who experience these exact same things though. They might say something about that like to Allah, right?
Well, I don't know. I can't know that those other people exist if I reject what God says about those people. God says they exist, but I can't be justified in believing that those people actually exist without God. So I have to trust God at all times. If I give up God, I've accepted this weird position of neutrality where I can't know anything, and I've given up all justification.
Because if you affirm Allah who is omniscient, then you would have affirmed an omniscience, and then you would be able to derive knowledge, correct?
Well, I wouldn't affirm Allah because my highest authority told me that Allah does not exist.
So to believe your highest authority, you've already affirmed your highest authority, correct? And this is where the circularity.
No, I'm receiving information from my highest authority to tell me the true nature of reality and how to defend my belief. I'm trusting in remember, everything's circular. We always circle back to our ultimate authority. So when you say, how do you justify that? I have to go back to my ultimate authority. Everybody has to go back to their ultimate authority.
But if such ultimate authorities cannot be justified without themselves, then I would argue that hardline skepticism is true. That their knowledge does not exist. I don't think so.
So you think knowledge does not exist?
That's not what I think. Because I have these sense perceptions, etc., in the Cartesian rationalist view. And I would say that those things I can't be mistaken about.
So how would you justify beliefs then in your worldview if you think knowledge exists? How do you have knowledge without God?
Knowledge are the things that I can be absolutely certain about, and so. So
it's not justified belief.
Well, I take justification to be reasoning, which makes it so that it's impossible for the belief to be false.
Well, no, I'm just. We got to get back to the whole belief thing. How do you know that belief exists? How do you know that consciousness lasts long enough for belief to exist?
I would argue that it's clear to me that I cannot believe that belief doesn't exist. That's impossible.
No, because you could have a consciousness that is a rapid succession of little consciousnesses that exist for a nanosecond that create the illusion of belief, but it's not actually a belief because it's a bunch of different consciousnesses creating this illusion of belief, but a belief is something that's held by one consciousness.
If this were the case, I would argue that the succession of consciousnesses when put together could hold a belief.
Okay, so but you don't. So now you've changed the definition of a belief.
No.
Are you saying that a belief is something that's pieced together by a hive mind?
It could be.
But you don't know if it is. So are you trusting in the hive mind or not?
I am aware of beliefs, and what causes those beliefs is perhaps not clear to me. Correct?
So you don't know what beliefs are, really? What are beliefs? Can you define a belief?
A belief is a way that I take the world to be, right?
I take the world, but who's I? How do you know what I is? What?
Are you pro-life?
I'm an abolitionist. I'm not pro-life. But
it's complete abolition portion.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
God bless.
Thank you.
Good to see you here.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So yeah, you can't justify the English language when you say I. Like you'd have to basically say every time you talked I or we.
Sure.
So, but you don't talk like that, and nobody talks like that. That's not the English language.
We always talk in ways that we don't strictly ontologically mean, right? So I'm perfectly fine saying I or we. That's okay. The succession of consciousness, if it's a we, I would say the belief exists.
But you can't justify belief in it because you don't know that it exists.
That's why I would be suspending judgment on whether or not it's I or we. That's why I'm admitting ignorance on the matter.
So you can't. So you're saying that belief is two different things at the same time. Belief is something held by one consciousness, and it's also something held by multiple consciousnesses together in succession?
Belief could be actualized by either of those things. is what I'm saying. Like, for instance, smoke, right? Is smoke made by fire, or is smoke made by burning rubber, right? Like rubber that's scraped on the asphalt. Well, it could be created by both, but that doesn't affect what smoke is.
Okay,
That's where this boils down to.
So you're saying that belief
identify with the thing that creates it.
So are you saying that the only belief that you can justify is the belief that belief exists?
I'm saying that I can justify that. I'm saying that there is,
because to me you've redefined belief so that it's not really, because I think most people would say belief is something created by one mind and not a hive mind, right?
I would not take it to be that way. I would say that beliefs could be held, if it appropriately generates a consciousness, could be held by us. What you have, the succession of rapid consciousnesses.
Right.
I would say that is belief, because it is a way that set of consciousnesses takes the world to be, and that's how I define it. I define as a way the world is taken to be. Okay,
but so is that the only belief that you think you can justify?
No, I can believe that there are these qualia apparent to me. Right?
Okay, so how does that get you anywhere? Well, why is that a good worldview to put faith in if you just have like this qualia stuff? Well, you're trusting that it exists.
Well, the qualia does exist. I'm not affirming the external world. Remember?
Okay, right. Okay.
I'm not affirming that I know this.
But you are using faith when you talk to me. Like, you're using faith at different points by making decisions that rely on things, on beliefs that are different than just the basics of qualia exist, or beliefs are a hive mind, or maybe not a hive mind. You have more beliefs than that,
yes,
that you're trusting in, and how are you justified in believing the things that you believe with your, I guess, atheistic worldview, or lack of faith in the all-knowing being? Thank you.
All right. There are like probability spectrums, right? Like
how is there probability? Say, instance, if you don't know the true nature of reality, how do you have probability?
You'd like Hugh. So that is a question that people have brought up, which seems to annihilate most worldviews, human skepticism, but it seems reasonable to most people.
What does? Probability?
Let's say the past is a good indicator of the future. Seems reasonable to most people. And I would say that I have gotten good results. It has seemed to me that I've gotten good results every time I've used this principle, so I shall continue to use it. Right?
But you're not justified in believing that it's going to be like the past. The future is going to be like the past. You're not justified in that.
It's like no one is, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I am justified in believing that because I put faith in the Christian worldview in which God tells us what's going to happen in the future to some extent.
But why not put faith in a different worldview, which you just simply assert that you can trust certain things?
Because the other worldviews put faith in finite, limited consciousness that doesn't have all the facts about reality, and
Allah would have all the facts about reality.
Well,
right?
Allah doesn't exist because my highest authority says He doesn't exist.
Right. So you know God exists because your life,
He's
God
omniscient.
has told you that He exists. Correct.
I'm justified in believing that God exists because if I didn't believe that He exists, I wouldn't be justified in believing anything. He's the ultimate. He's the ultimate justification.
My question here. So this boils down to a two-pronged thing, right? You claim you need omniscience.
Right.
But omniscience is not specified on what kind. So, for example, Allah, right? But then you're saying, well, I know it can't be Allah because God has told me it's not Allah. So you're presupposing God's existence before you can rule out alternatives and to know it's the Christian God.
I'm putting faith in my mind and revelation from God at the same time. Have your intuitions
ever been wrong?
I'm not talking about intuitions.
No, we are there. You said that something has been revealed to you that is an intuition of sorts, right? There is something that you have perceived that you're like, well, it can't be Allah because I have perceived this thing that I attribute to an external source.
No, I'm not saying it's not Allah because of that.
Why isn't it Allah?
I'm saying
because
I'm always putting faith. I always have to operate on faith in my ultimate authority, correct? Right. So I'm going to go with what my ultimate authority says about any given topic. Right. So that if the given topic is another omniscient being, am I going to say, oh, well, I'm going to try with my little finite mind now to figure out if this omniscient being is the one I should trust in? When if I ditch my omniscient being, God, and I go with myself, now I can't even be justified in believing that you exist or he exists, and how would I come to a conclusion about anybody?
People who were raised Muslim are justified in believing Allah and knowing so, correct?
No.
Because they have always perceived this, and they can't reject Allah because that would be rejecting the omniscient authority.
No, the Bible says that God, all people know that God. It doesn't matter. My ultimate authority says that they know that God exists, the true God, not Allah, and they suppress the truth about him.
So, essentially, this comes down to, in my lights, God has told me that Allah doesn't. God has told me I can rule out possible alternatives other than God, and that's how I know God exists. Essentially,
that's how I know that God is the only God. I know that God exists because He's revealed that to me through revelation. He created me, and He's given me revelation. He's given revelation to me, and I'm justified in the belief in Him by the fact that if I did not believe in Him, I could not be justified in anything. The proof that God exists is that without Him, I could not prove anything. So as soon as I assert the idea of proof or knowledge, to be consistent, I have to put faith in revelation from Omniscience, because if I didn't, I would not have justification. I would not have proof. Those things require existence of an all-knowing being.
Like Allah.
Allah doesn't exist.
But
because my ultimate authority says He doesn't exist. I can't give up my highest authority and say, well, now I'm going to use my finite mind to try to figure out whether or not.
On your part, this is an impression in your mind, right? How do you know that this is from your ultimate authority if it's simply seeming in your brain?
No, it's words on a page. It's called the Bible. The Bible says there's only one God, and that Allah does not exist.
Correct. That was at least transcribed by a mortal hand.
People who are inspired by God to write down the words He wanted written down. The Bible is my source of revelation.
How do you know the Bible's accurate then? Do you self-justify it with the Bible?
The reason I know the Bible is true is because if it wasn't true, I wouldn't be able to justify any belief. Because it's revelation from God, the God who tells us He gave us the Bible, who's revealed to us that He gave us the Bible, who reveals to us the true nature of reality in various ways.
Is there are people who don't have the same seemings as you, right? There exist Muslims who do believe these things, right?
They believe in a different God.
Exactly, and they have all the same seemings as you. The Torah is, the Quran, my bad. The Quran's accurate, right? Muhammad was a prophet, Allah is real.
It's not a seeming, it's a certainty.
Well, they would claim with the same level of certainty as you, with the same grounds that you do.
Sure, and they'd be wrong.
But there's no way to differentiate from me as an outside observer, correct? Well, there's no way to know. And
for you, if you're going to embrace a position of neutrality to try to differentiate, at that point, you're trusting in finite consciousness, and you can't even be justified in believing that I exist.